Captain Lee Hyun gripped the command chair as warning alarms blared throughout the exploration vessel Aurora. The bridge crew worked frantically at their stations while sparks flew from overloaded circuits. Their experimental faster-than-light drive had pushed beyond all safety limits during what should have been a routine test flight. "Drive core is going critical," shouted Chief Engineer Yoon Hana from her station. "I can't contain the energy build-up much longer." Kim Solar, the ship's chief navigator, called out desperately, "Captain, we need to jump now or we'll be vaporized. The coordinates are completely scrambled, though. I have no idea where we'll end up." Hyun made the split-second decision that would change everything. "All hands brace for emergency hyperspace jump. Do it now, Solar." The Aurora disappeared in a brilliant flash of blue light, carrying its crew of 200 humans into the unknown depths of space. When the ship emerged from hyperspace seconds later, the crew found themselves staring at something impossible, a vast armada of alien warships surrounding them in perfect formation. The alien vessels were unlike anything humanity had ever imagined. Each ship stretched over 5 kilometers long, their hulls seeming to be carved from living crystal that pulsed with internal light. Geometric patterns of energy danced across their surfaces like breathing circuits. The smallest escort ships dwarfed Earth's largest space stations. "Sir, we're being scanned by multiple sources," reported Communications Officer Park Jae-ho, his voice barely steady. "The energy readings are off the charts. These ships could vaporize us without breaking." A sweat. Before anyone could respond, the main view screen flickered to life. A towering figure appeared, clearly alien but vaguely humanoid in shape. Its body seemed to be made of translucent crystal formations that shifted colors from deep purple to brilliant gold. Where a human would have eyes, 2 points of pure white light burned with ancient intelligence. The being spoke in a voice that somehow translated directly into their minds. "Greetings, primitive species. I am Commander Zilvender of the Veltari Imperial Fleet. Your presence here indicates your desire to petition for membership in our Galactic Dominion Empire. Prepare for escort to Prime Station for processing." Captain Hyun stood quickly, trying to project calm authority despite their desperate situation. "Wait, there's been a misunderstanding. We're not here to join anything. Our ship malfunctioned and we ended up here by accident." But the alien commander had already cut the transmission. Dozens of the crystal ships moved into escort formation. Around the Aurora, their weapon systems powering up with threatening hums that could be felt through the hull. "Captain," whispered Kim Solar urgently, "their smallest ship has more firepower than our entire Earth defense fleet. We don't have much choice here." The journey to Prime Station took 3 days through hyperspace corridors that bent reality around them. The humans watched in amazement as they passed massive space stations, artificial worlds, and fleets of ships from dozens of different alien species. Some looked like mechanical spiders, the size of city blocks. Others resembled floating jellyfish, made of pure energy. Prime Station itself defied comprehension, a structure so massive it had its own gravity field and weather systems. The station's docking bays could hold thousands of ships, and the Aurora looked like a tiny shuttle next to the other vessels. The moment they docked, teams of different alien species boarded their ship. The processing team included floating robots with scanner arrays, insectoid creatures with multiple arms carrying data tablets, and more of the crystal Veltari overseeing everything. "Species classification 47392, announced one of the robots in a monotone voice. "Primitive bipedal carbon-based life forms. Technology level, rudimentary. Threat assessment, negligible. Processing for Outer Rim probationary territory assignment." Captain Hyun tried repeatedly to explain their situation to anyone who would listen, but the Empire's bureaucracy operated like a massive machine that couldn't be stopped once it started processing. Forms were filled out in alien languages, biological. Samples were taken, and their ship's technology was briefly scanned and dismissed as quaint but ineffective. Within hours, they were assigned territory designation XK7739 in the Outer Rim sectors, a barely habitable world that the Empire used for species they considered too primitive to be worth much attention. The entire process felt like being processed through some cosmic immigration office run by beings who saw humans as nothing more than another entry, in an endless database. As the Aurora prepared to depart for their assigned territory, none of the crew realized they had just been handed the opportunity of a lifetime. The Empire had made a critical error in judgment. They had completely underestimated what humans were capable of when their backs were against the wall and their survival was on the line. The world designated XK7739 was a harsh place that the Empire had essentially written off as worthless. Rocky mountains stretched across barren landscapes under twin suns that baked the surface during the day and left it freezing at night. Most species would have struggled to survive here, but humans had adapted to worse conditions on Earth. Park. Jiho, now serving as colony administrator, stood on a cliff overlooking their growing settlement. In just 6 months, they had transformed a patch of wasteland into a thriving base. Prefabricated buildings dotted the landscape, solar collectors gleamed on every rooftop, and hydroponics farms provided fresh food. The humans had even managed to tap into underground water sources that previous survey teams had missed. The Empire really doesn't understand humans at all, Jiho muttered to himself, watching construction crews work on expanding their defensive perimeter. Security Chief Choi Mina approached, carrying a tablet displaying patrol reports. Jiho, we've got movement on the outer sensors. Looks like we're about to have visitors, and they're not the friendly type. The raiders came without warning, as they always did in the Outer Rim territories. 3 sleek attack ships dropped out of hyperspace, their hulls painted in the traditional black and red colors of the Nexus Corsairs, the most feared pirate organization in this sector of the galaxy. The lead ship was commanded by Captain Vex Talor, a veteran raider whose species resembled a cross between a shark and a praying mantis. He had been pillaging Outer Rim colonies for decades, and primitive species like these humans were usually his easiest targets. Broadcasting on all frequencies, came the translated voice over the Aurora's communication system. Surrender your resources and technology, or we will take them by force. You have 10 minutes to comply. On the colony's command center, Choi Mina looked at the tactical display showing 3 heavily armed ships against their single exploration vessel. By all conventional wisdom, they were completely outmatched. The raider ships carried plasma cannons, missile launchers, and energy shields that could deflect most known weapons. Jiho, they want us to surrender everything we've built here, Mina reported. Standard raider demands, all our technology, half our population as slaves, and our ship. Park Jiho's expression hardened. These pirates had clearly never fought humans before. Patch me through to Captain Lee Hyun on the Aurora. It's time to show these raiders what happens when they threaten human colonies. The Aurora might have been classified as primitive by imperial standards, but human military engineering had always focused on one thing: making weapons that actually worked in real combat situations. Their railgun systems could accelerate projectiles to incredible speeds using electromagnetic fields, and their missiles carried kinetic penetrator warheads designed to punch through any armor. Raiders are moving into attack formation, reported Kim Solar from the Aurora's bridge. They're not even bothering with evasive maneuvers. They think we're helpless. Captain Lee Hyun smiled grimly. Let them think that. Weapons systems online. Target their lead ship first, then the escorts. Remember, aim for their engine sections. We want clean kills. The first railgun shot caught the pirates completely by surprise. The tungsten slug, traveling at 30% of light speed, went straight through the lead ship's energy shields as if they weren't even there. The projectile punched through the hull, destroyed the main reactor, and came out the other side in a shower of sparks and debris. Captain Vex Talor had exactly 3 seconds to realize his shields were useless before his ship exploded around him. The 2 remaining raider ships scrambled to respond, but human tactics were unlike anything they had encountered. Instead of facing the pirates head-on like other species did, the Aurora used hit-and-run attacks, appearing from behind asteroids and space debris to fire devastating salvos before disappearing again. "Where are they? Where are they?" screamed the second ships. Commander, as another railgun shot, crippled his weapons systems. These humans fought like ghosts, never staying in one place long enough to be targeted effectively. The third and final raider ship tried to retreat, but human-designed missiles were faster and more maneuverable than anything in the pirate arsenal. The ship didn't make it 3 kilometers before being torn apart by kinetic warheads. From start to finish, the entire battle lasted less than 8 minutes. 3 veteran pirate ships, armed with the best weapons money could buy on the black market, had been completely destroyed by a single human exploration vessel using what the Empire considered primitive technology. News of the engagement spread through the galactic communication networks like wildfire. The report that reached Imperial headquarters was almost unbelievable. Species Tharva 47-392 had annihilated an entire Nexus Corsair attack squadron without taking a single casualty. High-ranking Imperial officials who had dismissed humans as harmless, primitives suddenly found themselves studying combat footage and asking uncomfortable questions. How had these newcomers made their energy shields completely useless? What kind of weapons could punch through military-grade armor like it was paper? On XK-7739, the humans continued building their colony, completely unaware that they had just announced their presence to the galaxy in the most dramatic way possible. Deep within the crystal spires of the Imperial Palace, Emperor Kavthulon materialized from pure energy into his physical form. The ancient ruler had existed for over 10,000 years, witnessing the rise and fall of countless civilizations across the galaxy. Very little surprised him anymore, but the reports about species Barton 47-392 were genuinely puzzling. The Emperor's advisor, a multi-armed creature called High Chancellor Mordex, prostrated himself before the throne. "Your Magnificence, the primitive species continues to defy all expectations. They have now destroyed 3 separate pirate fleets and established mining operations that exceed Imperial efficiency standards by 40%. Kavthulon's energy form flickered with interest. Throughout the Empire's history, advancement through the ranks had always followed the same pattern. Species would gradually prove themselves worthy through displays of strength in ritual combat. The strongest warriors became champions, and champions earned the right to govern territories and command fleets. "Summon their leaders to the capital games," the Emperor commanded. "If these humans wish to be taken seriously, they must prove themselves in the arena like every other species. Send word to the gladiator masters. I want to see what makes these creatures so special." The message reached the human colony within days. Captain Li Hyun read the imperial decree with a mixture of concern and curiosity. Refusing the Emperor's invitation was not an option, but sending their people into alien gladiatorial combat seemed like a death sentence. "They want us to send a champion to fight in their arena," Hyun explained to the assembled colony leaders. "Winner gets promoted up their military hierarchy. Loser gets dead." Nam Do-hyun, the colony's head of security training, stepped forward. He had been a mixed martial arts instructor back on Earth and had adapted his skills to the challenges of their new world. "I'll go, Captain. Someone has to represent humanity, and I'd rather it be me than risk anyone else." The Capital Games Arena was a massive structure that could hold over 1 million spectators from across the galaxy. The fighting pit itself was a technological marvel. It could transform into any environment imaginable, from scorching deserts to frozen wastelands to zero-gravity asteroid fields. Nam Do-hyun stood in the preparation chambers, watching other species champions through the viewing screens. There was Korthak the Destroyer, a rhinoceros-like creature whose species had conquered 12 worlds through pure brute force. The insectoid hive queen Zixandra commanded a swarm mind that could predict her opponent's moves before they made them. Each champion represented thousands of years of combat evolution within their species. The human looked small and fragile by comparison, wearing simple armor and carrying basic weapons that seemed primitive next to the energy blades and plasma cannons his opponents wielded. "First match," announced the arena's mechanical voice. "Champion Nam Do-hyun of species number 47-392 versus Blademaster Vex Corian of the Steel Claw Syndicate." The Steel Claw warrior was a 7-foot-tall humanoid covered in metallic scales, wielding energy weapons that could slice through starship hulls. The arena transformed into a rocky canyon environment, giving both fighters places to take cover and maneuver. Vex Corian charged forward with a battle cry, his twin energy blades humming with deadly power. This was how combat had always worked. In the Empire, direct confrontation between warriors, testing strength against strength in honorable battle. Nam Do-hyun did something completely unexpected. He ran away. The crowd erupted in confusion as the humans sprinted toward the canyon walls, apparently fleeing from his opponent. Vexicorian pursued, confident in his superior speed and weaponry. But as he rounded a corner, loose rocks suddenly cascaded down from above, triggered by tripwires the human had somehow set up in seconds. While his opponent struggled to free himself from the rock slide, Do-hyun circled around and attacked from behind, using a combat knife and hand-to-hand techniques that no gladiator had ever seen. The Steel Claw warrior went down before he even realized what was happening. "Impossible," whispered Emperor Kavthalon from his observation box. "How did the primitive set traps so quickly?" The second match was even more bewildering, facing a massive creature that relied on intimidation and overwhelming force. Do-hyun spent the first 5 minutes of the fight talking to his opponent instead of attacking. "You know, back on my world we have creatures that look just like you," the human said casually, dodging a devastating claw swipe. "Big, scary, lots of teeth, but they're actually pretty gentle once you understand their behavior patterns." The alien champion, expecting fear and desperation, became increasingly confused by this strange creature who seemed more interested in having a conversation than fighting. By the time he realized the human was analyzing his attack patterns and psychological weaknesses, it was too late. After 6 victories in a row, using tactics that violated every rule of traditional gladiatorial combat, Nam Do-hyun found himself promoted to regional champion status, a rank that normally took decades to achieve. Meanwhile, back on XK7739, engineer Yoon Hana was making her own breakthroughs. The energy readings from the arena battles had given her new insights into Imperial technology. She began developing hybrid systems that combined human engineering principles with alien energy sources, creating weapons and defensive systems that outperformed anything in the Imperial arsenal. The galaxy was beginning to take notice of these mysterious humans who fought without honor, won without following the rules, and advanced through the ranks faster than anyone in Imperial history. Captain. Lee Hyun stood in what had once been a massive Imperial data archive, now converted into the humans' intelligence headquarters. The walls were lined with holographic displays showing star maps, population statistics, and resource distribution across the Empire's thousands of worlds. What they had discovered over the past months made his stomach turn. "Show me the Caliph." "Sector again," Hyun requested, his voice tight with controlled anger. Engineer Yoon Hana manipulated the holographic controls, bringing up detailed information about a region containing 47 inhabited worlds. The Caliph people were master terraformers before the Empire arrived. They could turn dead planets into garden worlds in less than a century. Now look at their current status. The display showed the harsh reality. The Caliph had been reduced to slave labor, forced to work in toxic mining operations while their homeworlds were strip-mined for rare minerals. Their population had dropped from billions to mere millions over the past 500 years. "It's the same pattern everywhere," reported intelligence officer Kim Sola, pulling up data from dozens of other sectors. "The Empire finds species with useful skills, conquers them, then works them to death while their leaders live in luxury on the capital worlds." Park Ji-ho, now serving as the human diplomatic liaison, shook his head in disgust. "We've identified over 3,000 species being systematically exploited. The Veltari and their allies control everything while everyone else suffers. The gladiatorial system isn't about honor. It's about keeping the subject species fighting each other instead of their oppressors." Yoon walked to the central display showing the Imperial throne world. The massive planet was a paradise of crystal spires and floating gardens, built entirely on the backs of enslaved civilizations. "How many beings are we talking about total?" Conservative. "Estimate, 40 trillion sentient beings living under Imperial oppression," Yoon Hana replied quietly. "The Empire has been running this system for over 10,000 years. The weight of that number settled on everyone in the room. 40 trillion souls trapped in a system designed to crush their spirits and exploit their labor. For the benefit of a ruling class, that saw them as nothing more than resources to be consumed. "Sir," Kim Solar said hesitantly, "there is one option. We haven't discussed, it's mentioned in the oldest imperial law codes, but no one has used it in over 3 millennia. Hyun turned to face her. "What option?" "The right of universal challenge. Any being holding the rank of sector commander or higher can formally challenge the Emperor for the throne itself. If issued properly, the challenge cannot be refused under any circumstances." The room fell silent. The idea was so audacious, so completely insane, that none of them had even considered it seriously. "The last challenge was issued 3,000 years ago by a coalition of rebel worlds," Solar continued. "They lost, and their entire species were wiped out as punishment. But the law still exists because the Empire's legitimacy is based on the concept that might makes right." Hyun stared at the holographic display of the throne world, his mind racing through the implications. If he issued the challenge and lost, humanity would be annihilated. But if they did nothing, they would eventually be crushed anyway once the Empire realized how dangerous they had become. "What exactly would this challenge involve?" he asked. "The ancient texts describe it as the trial of absolute dominion." "Yoon," Hana replied, accessing the relevant database. "It's not just single combat, it's a comprehensive test of leadership, military strategy, and the ability to command loyalty from diverse species. The challenger must prove they can rule the Empire better than the current Emperor." Over the next several days, Hyun consulted with every human leader and considered their options carefully. They could continue their quiet rise through the Imperial ranks, hoping to gradually reform the system from within. They could attempt to organize a rebellion among the oppressed species. Or they could take the ultimate gamble. Finally, he made his decision. The formal challenge was broadcast across the entire galactic communication network, reaching every world in the Empire simultaneously. Captain Lee Hyun, representing humanity and holding the rank of sector commander, formally invoked the right of universal challenge against Emperor Kavthulon. The response was immediate and overwhelming. On the throne world, imperial nobles who had lived in luxury for millennia suddenly found themselves facing the possibility of real change. On slave worlds across the galaxy, oppressed species whispered the news to each other in secret, hardly daring to hope. Emperor Kavthulon himself was forced to appear before the Imperial Council to formally acknowledge the challenge. His energy, form crackled with barely contained fury as he addressed the assembled nobles. "In 10,000 years of rule, I have never faced such insolence," the Emperor declared. "This primitive creature dares to challenge the natural order of the universe itself. Very well, let the trial of absolute dominion commence. When I am finished with this human, his species will serve as an example to any who might consider following his path." Across the galaxy, trillions of beings prepared to witness something that had not happened in 3,000 years, a direct challenge to the throne of the Galactic Dominion Empire. The outcome would determine not just humanity's survival, but the fate of every enslaved species in the known universe. The greatest test in human history was about to begin. The Grand Nexus Arena had been transformed into something never before seen in Imperial history. Representatives from every single species in the Empire filled the massive structure. Over 10 million beings gathered to witness the trial of absolute dominion. Floating observation platforms carried delegates from the farthest reaches of the galaxy, while holographic broadcasts beamed the event to trillions more across thousands of worlds. Captain Lee Hyun stood in the center of the arena, looking impossibly small against the backdrop of this cosmic amphitheater. He wore simple human military dress uniform, carrying no weapons except his service sidearm. Across from him, Emperor Kavthulon materialized in his most intimidating form, a towering figure of pure energy crackling with the power of 10,000 years of accumulated authority. "Let the trial begin," announced the ancient arbiter, a mechanical being older than the Empire itself. "First phase, combat of champions." The arena floor transformed into a battlefield replica of the famous siege of Korthak Prime, where the Empire had crushed its last major rebellion centuries ago. Energy weapons appeared at designated points, along with defensive positions and tactical advantages that both combatants could use. Emperor Cavthulon moved with the fluid grace of a being who had perfected warfare across millennia. Energy bolts erupted from his form, each one capable of vaporizing a starship. The air itself seemed to burn around him as he advanced, confident in his overwhelming power. But Hyun did something that no challenger had ever attempted. He began talking to the crowd. "Citizens of the galaxy," his voice rang out through the arena's amplification systems. "Look around you. See how many different species surround us. The Veltari, the Zephyrians, the Kalith, the Nexari, thousands of unique civilizations, each with their own gifts and perspectives." As he spoke, Hyun moved constantly, using the terrain and cover to avoid the Emperor's devastating attacks. But more importantly, his words were reaching the audience in ways that pure combat never could. The Emperor wants you to believe that strength comes from domination, that peace comes from fear. But I've seen something different. I've seen what happens when species work together as equals instead of master and slave. A massive energy blast barely missed Hyun, melting the rock where he had been standing seconds before. But the human pressed on, his voice never wavering even as he fought for his life. "On our colony world, we have Veltari engineers working alongside human technicians, Kalith terraformers sharing their knowledge freely, Nexari artists creating beauty that inspires us all. This is what the galaxy could be, not a pyramid of oppression but a community of equals." Something unprecedented began to happen in the arena. Species that had been enemies for centuries started looking at each other differently. Oppressed peoples began to straighten their backs and lift their heads. The Emperor's own Veltari nobles shifted uncomfortably as they realized their human subjects were watching them with new eyes. Second phase, strategic command, the Arbiter announced. The arena transformed again, becoming a massive holographic command center. Both challengers were given control of simulated fleets and tasked with defending a sector from invasion. This was meant to test their ability to command military forces and make tactical decisions under pressure. Emperor Cavthulon deployed his forces in the traditional imperial manner, overwhelming firepower concentrated in massive formations designed to crush opposition through sheer might. His strategy had worked for 10,000 years, grinding down resistance through superior technology and numbers. Hyun took a completely different approach. Instead of commanding from above like a distant god, he communicated directly with individual ship captains. He asked for their input, incorporated their suggestions, and treated each crew as valuable partners rather than expendable resources. "Captain Zilmora of the Nexari 4th Fleet," Hyun's voice carried across the command simulation. "Your people know these asteroid fields better than anyone. What's the best way to use them against the invasion force?" The Nexari captain, surprised to be consulted rather than simply ordered, provided tactical insights that helped the human forces achieve victory after victory. Other species began volunteering information and strategies, eager to contribute to a leader who actually listened to them. Final phase, trial of leadership, the Arbiter declared. This was the ultimate test. Representatives from every species in the Empire would choose which leader they wanted to follow. The Emperor stood confident, surrounded by the familiar symbols of imperial power and authority. But when the votes were counted, the result was stunning. Species after species chose the human who had shown them respect over the Emperor who had oppressed them for millennia. Even some of the Veltari nobility voted for change, tired of a system that benefited only the very few at the top. Emperor Cavthulon's energy form flickered with rage and disbelief. "This is impossible. I am the rightful ruler. I have the power." "You have force," Hyun replied calmly. "But power, real power, comes from the consent of those you lead, and they've chosen a different path." The moment of victory arrived, but instead of claiming the imperial throne, Captain Lee Hyun did something that shocked every being in the arena. He walked to the ancient coronation platform and, instead of accepting the crown, smashed the symbol of imperial authority into fragments. "There will be no more emperors," he declared to the stunned galaxy. "No more species enslaved to serve the ambitions of others. From this day forward, we are the Galactic Federation, a union of equals governed by representatives chosen by each world and species." The transformation was immediate and profound. Across the galaxy, oppressed species rose up, not in violent rebellion, but in joyful celebration. Prison worlds became free colonies. Slave species reclaimed their homelands. The rigid hierarchy that had defined galactic civilization for 10,000 years crumbled in a single day. The humans who had stumbled into the Empire by accident had done something unprecedented. They had revolutionized the very concept of how civilizations could coexist. Instead of conquest through force, they had achieved victory through the radical idea that all species deserved dignity, respect, and the right to determine their own destiny. The end.